FPL is back for the 25-26 season, and in today's video, I've taken a crack at a very first FPL draft ahead of game week 1. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. FPL has finally launched for the 25-26 season, so of course, I had to come straight out with my first game week 1 draft. Now, by no means is this going to be perfect, but I've had a good look and I'm liking the structure so far, so let me know what you think of the draft in the comments below. It won't be perfect though, and I'm sure edits will be made between now and the start of the season. In the meantime, if you like today's content, leave a like, hit subscribe as well, and if you want to see more of my videos in pre-season, and I'm going to be doing them most days, hit that notification bell and you won't miss out on any future content. In the meantime though, let's stop looking at just a blank team screen and let's get straight into it. So first off, it's important to mention that this game week 1 draft actually still has 0.5 million in the bank, which means if there are any small improvements that you think I could make to this side, I've got a little bit of wiggle room, so let me know where you think that could be best placed to improve by 0.5 in any of the positions. Starting off in goal and in defence as a combination, I've gone with Sells in goal to begin with, one of the top point scoring keepers last year, comes in at 5 million, which I think is a very fair price considering Pickford, last season's top scoring keeper, came in at 5.5. Nottingham Forest's opening 6 fixtures are good from a defensive point of view as well, so I've got no hesitation in selecting either a defender or a goalkeeper. Now, the defenders that I like from Nottingham Forest, mainly because of the defensive contribution bump that they'll get this season, are Murillo and also Milenkovic. They'll get a little bit of a benefit this year, but they also come in at a slightly more premium price at 5.5 million. So if I can find a way of incorporating them, I will do so. But Sells did not finish too far behind them, even if you account for their defensive contribution bump last season. So at 5 million, I think that's a fair price to be paying for a goalkeeper with good fixtures to start off the season. And Forest last year were a fantastic defence as well. So it seems like just covering the bases there. I've put Kinski as my backup keeper for now. There are a few articles going around that Thomas Frank likes Kinski and he could give him a chance as the starting keeper, or at least he'll be fighting with Vicario for that starting spot for Spurs. He comes in at 4 million, so it just seems like a gamble worth taking at this point. There will be other 4 million keepers that might get a look in at some point, but he seems like as good an option as any, as long as you're not tripled up on Spurs elsewhere. In defence, I've gone with 2 semi-premium defenders. In fact, there are no defenders this year over 6 million, which I'm a little bit surprised by, but Ait Nouri comes into the game at that top price at 6 million, and I think it's important to have at least one defender at that price so you can easily move across to anyone that comes into fashion without needing 2 free transfers to do so. So I've gone Ait Nouri. It's probably the biggest gamble for minutes in my starting 11 at the moment, but I think it's a risk worth taking considering the attacking output that he's capable of. Even in a Wolves kit, he got the most attacking contributions for a defender last season, and in a Man City shirt at left back, you'd imagine that that improves as well. He'll also likely get more clean sheets, and his underlying data is still very good too. Again, in a Wolves kit, so you'd imagine that gets slightly improved at Man City. Maybe a slight X minutes doubt just because they've got Gvardiol, who did play left back, and Pep does tend to take a little while to integrate players, but he played in the Club World Cup in nice advanced positions, and I think it's going to spell a little bit of a system change for City. I think this was a very smart signing. He's going to fit in really well as a bit of a box crasher for Man City. I love him, and I think it's a risk that I'm willing to take at 6 million. Moving across, my 5.5 million defender is currently Daniel Munoz. Now, fullbacks in FPL this season are probably going to be a little bit less powerful generally because they don't tend to get defensive contribution points, that new thing that FPL have brought in. But Munoz is a bit of an exception. He actually would have benefited a fair amount from the defensive contribution bump last season, and he was already a very good asset from an FPL point of view regardless. Crystal Palace's fixtures to start the season aren't incredible, but they're also not so off-putting that I think it makes Munoz a bad pick. At 5.5 million, he's great from an attacking point of view. He's good on the bonus points, and he does actually get a few defensive contribution points every now and then. So I think he makes a lot of sense, but he's by no means a lock in my side at the moment. There are other 5.5 millions or even 6 million assets that I like. You've got the Arsenal defenders. You've got Frimpong and Kirkes and Van Dijk all at Liverpool at 6 million. You've got Cucurella at 6 million as well, or even Gvardiol if you wanted to double up on City. And I can afford any one of those to start with that 0.5 in the bank. So let me know if you think that that is the best place to spend that extra money. But for now, let's move on to my third and fourth defenders. Wan-Bissaka and Konsa work really well as a rotation combination for the first 10 or so game weeks. I believe they play 6 promoted clubs between them across those 10 game weeks, which is very good going considering that you've only got 10 game weeks to play with there. Wan-Bissaka starts off as my starter. His underlying data was actually pretty decent at West Ham. West Ham aren't the best defence, but when they do keep clean sheets, he was pretty good on the bonus. And the back half of the season, he was a fantastic underpriced defender. So they've got good fixtures to start the season. They rotate well with another solid defence, Aston Villa. And Konsa coming into the game at 4.5 million as well means that just for 9 million, I've got that third defender spot locked down and a regular 90-minute bench option at any given moment if a disaster were to strike, which of course that probably will happen in the first 10 or so game week. So it's good to have a playing 4.5 defender that I can rely on any given game week, and either of them could get a defensive contribution bump. Now, Wan-Bissaka doesn't get many of those looking at seasons past, but Konsa does get a fair few, or could get a fair few, considering the position he plays in. So I like them as a combination. And then finally on my bench, Heaven for Man United is a 4.0 defender. It's early days, so I'm sure another 4.0 will come out of the woodwork and look like a decent option. He's a bit of a placeholder, but Man United fans are excited by him. So maybe there's a sneaky chance that he starts matches for them, and then there's nothing really stopping him from continuing. But I don't want to talk about him for too long at the moment. That is a bit of a burner spot. I'm not expecting to use my fifth defender at all really this season, hopefully. So if I can find a starting solid 4.0 option, then I'll pick them over Heaven, but he seems like as good an option as any at this point. Right then, so moving into the midfield, and I've tried to go with a bit of a balance with different price points covered here, but meanwhile also nailing down the expected minutes, which is a mistake I've made in previous seasons. I'm very keen to avoid that kind of mistake this season. So almost all of my players in my starting 11, I'm extremely confident get 80 minutes plus per game, and I'm not at all worried about their starting spot in any of the sides. Mo Salah, I don't think we need to talk about him too much. He's come into the game at 14.5 million. The fixtures, I wouldn't say are box office going into the first few, but they're good enough, or any fixtures really are good enough for Mo Salah to still be a good option. He's likely going to be my captain game week 1 at home to Bournemouth, who have lost a lot of their defenders. Kirkes, they've lost Huijsen and Kepa in goal as well. So 3 out of their 5, if you include their goalkeeper, have now gone. And Zabani's subject to transfer speculation too. So I think that's a good captainable home fixture for Salah. He is expensive, and I don't think you can realistically find a well-balanced side with both Salah and Haaland. Haaland and City do have good opening fixtures, but I think Salah has just proven that he's so inevitable, especially at the start of seasons, that it's just not a risk that I want to take to begin with. So I'm going to go with him almost certainly. I'll probably do a future draft looking at what a Haaland draft might look like, or if there's a way of maybe squeezing both of them in. But 28.5 million for the two of them, that's going to be pretty tough to do. So Salah's in. Next to him, Cole Palmer. Chelsea's opening few fixtures are pretty decent, and Palmer, although he wasn't great towards the back end of last season, I still back him as an elite level FPL asset. He still broke 200 points comfortably, even with a really big fall off in the second half of last season. Looked great in the Club World Cup after the end of last season. And with the signings that Chelsea have made, I expect them to come out strongly at the start of the season, even with a shorter break from the Club World Cup. So Palmer isn't a lock in my game week 1 side. There are other options that I could look at there and maybe save some money. I could go double Liverpool midfield with Wirtz as well. Really like the look of him at 8.5 million. Can't quite squeeze him in as a third midfielder, so he'd probably have to be that second spot instead of Palmer. I also like Bruno Fernandes at 9 million, although I don't love the opening fixtures. Same goes for Saka at 10 million. So Palmer in there at the moment I like, because not only is he a great FPL asset with good fixtures to start the season, 90 minutes, penalties, everything you could want, but also if things didn't look too great, you can move down to a Wirtz, a Bruno, a Saka very easily if you needed to with one free transfer. So I like him as not a placeholder, but something that covers a bit of a crisis station if you were to hit a panic button at some point. After that, you've got Rodgers, 7 million, I think is a fair enough price considering how locked he is for minutes at Aston Villa. I do wonder if my 0.5 million is best spent here. And maybe I could upgrade him to Eberechi Eze at 7.5 million. He does get penalty share as well. He kind of has shared them in the past with Mateta. He could get them yet again this season. And he's an elite player. We know how good Eze is. So I am wondering, and I did play around with maybe having Eze in this first draft instead of Rodgers. But I really like Aston Villa's opening few fixtures from an attacking point of view. And Rodgers being as nailed as he is, he's a young player as well. So I expect him to come on another step this season. I expect him to be even better on the underlying data, even more nailed into the side for Aston Villa, even more important to everything they do. I do kind of fancy him, and I haven't seen him in a ton of drafts yet. So I've stuck him in for now, 50-50 between him and Eze right now, but let me know which you prefer. I get a feeling most people prefer Eze, but I think Rodgers with that 0.5 to spend elsewhere might also be interesting. So let me know. I'm not too fussy either way. Ndiaye is going to be popular as a midfielder for a lot of managers. I think the reason he's going to be popular is because Everton's opening few fixtures are very good as well, admittedly. Leeds on the opening day is a great starting point, but after that, it's still looking pretty decent. And Ndiaye has the penalties as well. So as a midfielder, last season came in as a forward, but he'll get the extra point for the goal this year, could also get the clean sheet points. And unlike any of the other strikers from last season, he actually did every now and then get a defensive contribution point. So he might get a little bump in the numbers as well. And given the talent that he has, given the fact that Everton seem to be recruiting well, they look a little bit more solid and stable than they have done in seasons past. Obviously, I say that now and they're going to be horrific, but I think they'll do pretty well this season. Ndiaye seems like a nice, easy entry route in that guarantees a penalty taker, guarantees 80 plus minutes a match. I really fancy him at 6.5 million, and there aren't a lot of options around that sort of price or below that I love the look of, especially not ones on penalties. So he might not be the most exciting pick, and you might see him a lot in different drafts, but I think the logic is that he's got all of the boxes ticked that you need for a decent option without him necessarily being a blockbuster option. So not the most exciting option, but I like him as a player. I think he's got great talent. Everton look like a team potentially on the up. He's got penalties and the minutes are good. So that's why he's in there. Interestingly, my fifth midfielder, I've gone maybe a little bit out of the box. The reason I've gone with Elliot Anderson at Nottingham Forest, historically not a great FPL pick. He's actually been bumped in price up to 5.5 million, which might again be a bit of a weird one to be selecting on that logic. But the reason he's been bumped in price is because of those defensive contributions that FPL have brought in. Elliot Anderson last season would have gotten something like 30, 35 points or 36 points. You can't get single points better than he would have done without the defensive contributions. So he had a huge bump all the way up to something like 150 points last season if defensive contributions had been a part of it. Now, that puts him level on points with players like Eberechi Eze and Ismail Assar last season, and very close to the likes of Rodgers as well. I think like 15, 20 points in it. So Elliot Anderson at 5.5 million, now we need to start considering these types of players, Caicedo as well, maybe Bruno Guimaraes too. These kind of players at a decent, cheapish price of 5.5 to 6 million are now decent options as a fourth, maybe fifth midfielder. I don't like him enough to have him as a regular starter. And the reason I don't is because he only got 8 attacking returns last season. And only 2 of those were goals as well. So yes, he will get points this year because of the defensive contributions, and he will get a bump and look like a good FPL asset over the season, but you're never going to get massive explosions from him because he rarely gets the attacking returns. So if he gets an attacking return in maybe 1 in every 5 games, which I think that's about right for 8 attacking returns in 38 last season. So if he got 1 in 5, let's say, and then gets a defensive contribution 1 in every 2, then you might get something like 4, 5, 3, 5, 8 out of him over a run. And that's not really exciting enough to be including as a regular starter. But what it is good enough to do is have first on your bench. And if you've got any injury, if you've got a suspension, rather than using a transfer, which has its own cost to it, Anderson can come off your bench and probably guarantee you, never guarantee, but probably get you 4 to 5 points pretty solidly in any given game week. And it automatically makes a hit almost not worth taking because you know that the player that you're bringing in is unlikely to outscore him by that 4 points. Obviously, there will be scenarios where it is worth doing, but Anderson is that nice safety net where if you've got a disaster, you can bring him in. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe he gets a goal. Maybe he gets one of those assists that he is capable of doing. But even if he doesn't, you're still likely to get 4 or 5 points out of him. And if that's the case, that's a pretty decent return for not having to use a transfer, if that makes any sense. So that's why he's in there. You could look at Caicedo. You could look at a few other options at 5.5 million who will get that defensive contribution bump. But I like Anderson. And if Morgan Gibbs-White goes, he might get a slightly more attacking role given to him at Nottingham Forest next season. And again, he's a young player. And I think he's going to make a step up this season as well. So not much of a risk on minutes, but I think the upside is there in terms of the defensive contributions, and he's a player on the up as well. So I expect more from him this season. I think 5.5 is about fair. And fifth midfielder, first on my bench most weeks, I think I'm okay with that. So rounding off my 15 with my 3 strikers, and I would intend on starting these strikers every week if possible, even if they don't necessarily have the best fixture. So Evan Nilsson in game week 1 away at Liverpool is not a great fixture. However, over a stretch of 7 or 8 game weeks, Bournemouth's attacking run doesn't look too bad. And if he could sneak something against Liverpool, would we all be shocked? Probably not that shocked. A good striker with 0.48 XG per 90 last season and potentially has penalties as well. He could get a goal in any given game. And as I say at the start of most seasons, for me anyway, a striker is a player that you're more willing to play in the tough fixtures than maybe a defender or a midfielder, because they're still going to be the focal point. And if they get any shots, or the team gets any shots, they're the ones likely to be on the end of them. And also, therefore, the ones likely to score the points if they are going to get anything. So yes, low chance of a goal in game week 1, but after that, I like Bournemouth's run. And Evan Nilsson, although he didn't get a ton of Premier League goals last season, he was injured for a bit. And when he was fit, great underlying data, led the line really well. And as a player on the eye, a very, very talented individual too. So I've got no qualms in picking him in game week 1, despite the opening fixture. And after that, I think I will probably be very happy I did, considering the fixtures that follow. Moving across to Dominic Solanke, which is basically the opposite of Evan Nilsson in the sense that he's got a great game week 1 fixture. Game week 2, I think it's up against Man City. Let me just double check with FPL team. Correct. Away at Man City, not ideal. But then after that, it's a nice run all the way, arguably, to game week 12, where you could play him in every single one of those fixtures. He comes in at I think a relatively sensible price at 7.5 million. I wouldn't say it's on the cheap side, but it's about bang on what I'd expect. And although Spurs were poor in the Premier League last season, I'd expect them to take a step up now under Thomas Frank. And Thomas Frank himself at Brentford last season was able to get a lot out of his starting striker. We'll talk about Wissa in a minute, of course, but they were able to create a lot of very high XG chances put on a plate for their centre forward. Solanke's going to be the player benefiting from that this season, you would think. And if they can get off to a good start, I've got no worries about his expected minutes as long as they don't sign Wissa, for instance. So Solanke should be nailed for minutes, might get penalties as well because Son's less and less of a factor these days. And we know the underlying data is not too bad either. So I think he's going to get a bit of a bump this season. I think he'll be better than last season. Fingers crossed anyway. And Burnley at home is, of course, a great starting point. The fixtures long-term look good. And if things weren't to go too well, the same with any of these 3 forwards, there are a few forwards at around 6.5 million, like Strand Larsen, for instance, who I do like the look of, that I can easily get to as well. So Solanke's in for me to start with. Wissa is the final player, which, again, I haven't seen him too many drafts just yet, but I think he'll get more popular. 7.5 million as well. He got 18 Premier League goals last season without penalties. And now Brian Mbeumo's off to Man United. I think we've got the here we go from Fabrizio, so I'm confident that that's gone ahead. Wissa is probably going to now get penalties. Now, I can't guarantee that because we have no way of knowing, but you think the starting striker for Brentford is going to probably put his hand up and say, hey, can I have penalties this season, boss? So if he does get penalties, then not only are we looking at a player who got really good underlying XG data last season, he got 18 Premier League goals without penalties. What can he get with penalties? Now, okay, they're without Norgard, they're without Mbermo, without Flecken, and they without Thomas Frank. So Brentford generally probably take a few marks down in our estimations. But are they going to turn into a team that just physically can't score goals overnight? I don't think so. I still think they'll be competitive. And even if they are struggling a bit in the Premier League, I still think Wissa's a good enough striker, and I still think they've got enough good players in there to create him good high XG chances. And they're not just going to forget everything that Thomas Frank and their team taught them and instilled into them over the last 4 or 5 seasons. So I still think Wissa is going to be a decent option. Brentford's fixtures to start off the season aren't electric, but they're also not terrible. So Nottingham Forest to begin with, Aston Villa, Sunderland, Chelsea, Fulham, Man United. I wouldn't say you've got a fixture that you'd want to bench him in until probably game week 9. I think even Man City at home is playable. And so if you're looking at a stretch of 13 game weeks here, maybe one fixture you're not too happy with. And let's be honest, by that point, most of your side's probably shifted around anyway, so Wissa might not even be in your team by that point. So I'm pretty happy with this as a 15. I've got, I think, just 7 and 7.5 million strikers, so it's a little bit inflexible there. I do have 0.5 extra to spend, which I've spoken about where I might want to spend it. Maybe Munoz up to a 6 million, like an Arsenal defender, or Van Dijk as well. Maybe Rodgers up to Eberechi Eze. Or maybe you could find another 0.5 million somewhere else and upgrade one of my 7.5 million strikers to an 8.5, for instance. So a lot of flex left to find and a lot of different combinations that I'm sure we'll go through. But this is a starting point. Lock on X minutes on a lot of these players. I'm very confident. Lots of penalty share here and some good fixtures in here as well if you can look fairly long term. I'm aware it's not going to be perfect for everyone because I can't inevitably have every player that everyone wants, but let me know what you think of this draft. Leave a like, hit subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and I'll be coming back with a Bench Boost Game Week 1 video, probably about this time tomorrow, maybe a little bit earlier. So hit that notification bell if you're interested in seeing what a Bench Boost 1 Game Week 1 side will look like.